I see. You found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, or possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you, listener, for tuning into this episode of The Oracles with James Tyson. It's me, James, and joining us today is parapsychologist, ufologist, Steve Mera. Steve is the UK's most respected researcher into the realms of ufology and the unexplained and supernatural. He's got over 1,000 hours of mainstream alternative TV programs to his credit, such as Fright Nights, Origin Unknown, National Geographic's Paranatural, Wild X-Files, Ghost Cases Canada, The Phenomenon Project. Its list goes on and on. Steve is also the head tutor for British investigators training course in Anomalous Phenomena and UFOs. He is the CEO of Phenomena Magazine. Now, Phenomena Magazine, you find that online. It's actually the world's largest free e-zine. It's an electronic magazine. It's distributed in 12 countries, over 1.8 million subscribers. Steve has authored several books, The A to Z, or A to Z of the Unknown, Strange Happenings, Paranormal Insight, and co-authored The Rochdale Poltergeist. And it's a story about poltergeist activity in a home in Manchester, England. And this one, bouncing over to this side of the planet, House of Fire and Whispers. That is a very, very nasty house down in Seattle, Washington, just down the road from me. So I'd love to dig in a little bit more about that. Steve is also the founder of the Scientific Establishment of Parapsychology. He started that back in 1996. He took over as chairman of MAPIT, the Manchester's Association of Paranormal Investigation and Training, and that was established by a guy named David Rees back in 1974, and who passed it on to Steve. Steve and I are going to talk about some very, very interesting things. One of the things that we will touch on is where he and his investigative partner, Barry Fitzgerald, who you may know from, I think he's been in 56 episodes of Ghost Hunters International. Pretty hard-nosed investigator. He and Steve have, I think they're 2 years into a 5-year project called Project Doorway. So if you're ever wondering where these UFOs may be coming from, we're not talking about the ones that we think might be, man-made and the government's flying them, but who the heck knows? But according to a number of recent surveys, a UFO is seen every 8 seconds around the world. And have you ever wondered how so many UFOs are actually getting here? Now, you can go back to the conventional scientific theories or guesses, or guesstimations that would have us believe that an advanced civilization just may have the technology to cover a vast distance of space, multiple light years at a time, getting yourself in a suspended animation, waking yourself up when you get 50 years into your trip. But what if that's not the case? What if they are traveling here using this unique form of physics we don't quite understand? Perhaps they are umping in and out of our reality, utilizing Earth's very own electron-diffused regions, better known as portals, what Steve and I will talk about, mostly Steve will talk about, as gravitational anomalies. And that's possibly how they're going to be bouncing around. So that's basically what we're going to do. We are going to touch on UFOs and their interaction and alien interaction with Earth. And this is about as long as you're going to hear me talk, because Steve is the one with all the information. Steve, you're up. How are you today?
Oh, thanks for having me on, James. An absolute pleasure to be able to talk with you from the other side of the world, we could say.
Yeah, it's amazing that we can do that. That literally, we can plunk ourselves down at a desk, turn on some wonky little electric book here, and communicate with somebody from the other side of the planet, which is fascinating. And particularly when we're talking about people, or possible people, that travel from other planets to here. So we're trying to catch up to them, I guess.
We try our best.
We try our best. Now, I was One of the things I was talking about in the introduction was that you took over from David Rees in his work.
Yes.
And one of the interesting things, and what jumped out at me, was he'd been doing it since 1974. And a lot of people don't realize that, a lot of younger people now think that the UFO phenomena has only been bouncing around for a decade or so.
Yes, that tends to be the general idea for most people, especially from the flying saucer era days of 1950s.
Yeah.
That tend to think that that's kind of when the subject was born. But the longer you actually spend in this subject, researching aerial phenomena, we could say, you kind of go full circle. I mean, obviously, when I started, my first investigation was back in 1983, 38 years ago, and my mentors told me that we are dealing with nuts and bolts crafts being flown by extraterrestrial beings which are traveling to Earth in a linear fashion from their planet to ours, and that was the general idea. It was the scope of the things at that time. But boy, have we come on so much over the years that it really has opened the doors to a lot more possibilities that are involved in regarding true aerial phenomena. We do know that the research goes back considerably a huge length of time. I mean, even if we just want to look at, for instance, the pictograms and artist work that has taken place representing this phenomena in paintings, in graphics, in arts throughout the 1300s and the 1400s and 15 and 1600s. They're immense, and they're all over the world. And we have to say that this isn't purely by chance. This isn't the imagination of artists that are just saying, hey, I'll just decide to paint this in the sky. These are very well thought out images and paintings, very well-known paintings, and it's worldwide. It's not something that's just been contained within one aspect of society. It's worldwide. But what's interesting is that during the 14 and 15, 16, 1700s, this phenomena was considered to be had a religious connotations to it. In fact, anything that was seen in the sky was probably thought to be godly or angelic in nature. And therefore, you would see it across a lot of images and paintings, artwork of the crucifixion of Christ, biblical scenes, even the famous painting of Jesus being baptized by John the Baptist. There are thousands of these these paintings all over the world, artwork, drawings, and they are still being discovered. So we have to consider that the people of that time were aware that we had things in the sky that could not be, at that time, readily identifiable. But then if we want to go back further than that, we can go back into the biblical, biblical days. I mean, we have the story of Moses and his original scriptures that indicate that there were 4 fiery objects in the sky which lent hand to him providing help to the amount of slaves that he was taken out of Egypt. And of course, the stories are very interesting because the stories tell that these things descended, and at pinnacle times during their travel, there was starvation obviously was setting in, that a strange substance fell from these objects, or was given from these objects, which was referred to as manu or manna. In Hebrew that would mean spiritual nourishment, and it stopped them from starving. It actually, not only that, but it made them healthier, and they would be able to conduct that very long trip, which took a considerable length of time. Now, when you read these scriptures, you have to kind of look between the lines and go, okay, what was he referring to? Well, these things are sometimes in plain sight within these scriptures. If you take the reference to Alexander the Great, where now he was very well known for besieging cities. He was quite a conqueror in the sense of speaking, and the story has it across scriptures that he was trying his best to besiege this particular city, which had 50-foot walls. They were huge, very much fortified, and there was a lot of struggling to try and besiege that city until one day, 2 flaming shields descended from the sky, firing a pencil beam light down at the wall, which caused the wall to crumble and allow Alexander the Great to invade the city and besiege it. Now, that is pretty much plain text within the scriptures. What you don't tend to see now is these in modern books. You don't tend to find there's more and more of these incidents that involve, you could say at that time, heavenly visitors have been taken out of a lot of the books that we read nowadays. In fact, there's more scriptures which talk of these incidents, which some of them will probably never come to light. It traces back to the days, to Babylonian days, really. But if we want to refer to the very first beings associated to sky gods, it would seem it would be the global, you could say, the global practice of worshipping serpent beings. Now, the serpent gods of old were associated to these crafts, and if you really research that, it goes back to 700 BC. That's why I can't seem to go back further than that. There doesn't seem to be enough information out there in regarding going back further than that. And certainly my colleague Barry Fitzgerald, who's also very attuned in this type of research, is found references to these serpent gods all over the world. And it seemed to be a thing that was taking place around about the same time. Of course, different cultures and different societies may have different references to these things. And of course, even some ancient buildings were built purposely in association to contact or interactions with these beings, which we've visited around the world. And some of these are still standing and are absolutely fascinating of how they've been built. So really, when you open the door to ufology, there are countless other doors that's going to swing open, and that's going to be into the crop circle phenomena. It's going to be into the mutilation phenomena. It's going to be into those profound incidents where they involve supernatural, paranormal occurrences, or even cryptid sightings in association to ufological encounters. So it's a crazy, crazy subject, ufology. The only way I can sort of deal with that is usually breaking it down into different sections. But the problematics that we've had, James, over the years is that we've closed doors on those subjects, and that's become very problematic. I mean, even if we go back to just back until the Blue Book days, everybody's talking about the new series that's out at the moment and into season 2 of Project Blue Book, and of course it's a little fictitious and there's a few facts thrown in there. They've got to make it entertaining, I guess, somehow. But the truth of the matter is that Blue Book officers, when they did want to bother going out there to investigate some claims, which didn't happen very often because it was kind of really just made to look something good, and really they didn't really have too much bother in it. It was mostly done for the general public through public demand as to what these UFOs are, to be honest with you. But people were telling them that they had profound experiences as well as just ufological experiences. In some cases, the phenomena manifested in the houses as paranormal disturbances in some cases. They weren't interested in that. I mean, the bottom line was, we don't want to get involved in all that ghosty stuff. Let's just stick to the facts of extraterrestrial contacts, possibly, or misidentifications of aircraft and so on and so forth. So, I talk about ufology all over the world now, and what I'm trying to do is advance the subject. I think the most researchers will agree now that certainly the leading ones throughout the world is that it has become rather static. The subject of ufology, I mean, some of the investigation that took place in the 1950s is actually better than what's being produced today. And it's become problematic because we've got too many variants of just great stories in the field and without any evidence. And I think it confuses the general public. I think that, there are two sides to how you want to approach this if you're interested in the subject. There are some absolutely amazing stories out there. But for me, it's about facts. For me, it's about evidence and trying to advance the subject of how are we going to investigate this? Where are we going now? You know, it's the 21st century. What do we know about this subject? Well, to be honest, you know, I mean, I think we really do need another scientific inquiry, a professional scientific inquiry into the subject of ufology. There hasn't really been one basically since the 60s and 70s, really. But from what we know now and the equipment that we have now, and the availability to access information so readily through internet sources would mean that a scientific inquiry into the subject now would reveal so much. And the more we've pressed into those areas, it's kind of the best way to describe it is that there is an outer circle to ufology and there's an inner circle to ufology. From being on the inside, from being an investigative researcher and lecturer, you will, after some period of time, realize there's an inner core where information is only circulated to a few. And everybody else is scrambling for information on the outside. Within that outer circle, there's a lot of colourful people and colourful stories which muddy the waters tremendously. And there are people who have certainly underlined their belief structure in regarding which way they want to go in regarding ufology, because I mean, I give you an example. When I was last in Arkansas, I was lecturing, and this was an event where there's a lot of people that think it's all love and light and that these beings are here to save us or save the planet, and it's nothing but good. However, I underlined during my lectures that if you want to look at the subject, you have to look at it as a whole. And to do that, you have to recognize that there is also warnings. There is also things which aren't, you might refer to as love and light incidents. You only got to look at the Colaris UFO incident from 77 to 78 for that, and numerous others that's taken place around the world where these objects were certainly causing harm to individuals. Now, love and light flew out the window that day, you know, so I always make sure that I play both sides of the coin. It is simply, this is what it is. This is what it represents. I'm not going to paint a picture one side or the other. And I think anybody who's out there and researching this phenomena and wants to witness this firsthand, then they have to be prepared that sometimes they don't know what they may be in for during that experience. You know, there are people who claim to have had good incidents, people that claim to have bad incidents. It's very, very difficult. I've talked to these people. It's very difficult to ascertain, you know, how they measure that intent. You know, I mean, I've had people say, well, it was a good experience because nothing bad happened, you know. So you can well imagine it can be a bit, you know, it's a bit of a dark area there trying to work out exactly what is actually occurring, because sometimes it could just be an agenda. It could just be an incident. You know, if you give 4 officers an incident to do, you know, go and interview this person and question them and stuff, I'm surely don't think that they care about the individual, about how they will perceive that incident to be. Is it a good one or a bad one? They're just doing the job, and it's usually left with the individuals to consider what it was all about at the end of the day, and do they put it into some bracket of it was a good experience or it was a bad experience. The problem is that we're faced with today is that it's varied across the world. And there are good and there's bad, and just like it is in the paranormal field, you know, it's problematic because there's just so many variants. So what I actually hoping for is trying to advance this subject. I've been working with a colleague now on a specific program known as Project Doorway. About 3 years in on a 5-year study, and it relates to the true aspects of ufology, of the phenomena itself, their capabilities, and the problematics that are being caused through research of this phenomena. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have now is people have a set belief system when it comes to this phenomena, and sometimes it's just best to leave that at the door, and whatever is experienced, and we take it from there. If we want to sort of go down the extraterrestrial hypothesis, well, I'll give you an example. Recent surveys across quite a number of countries. Now, we can't obviously get information from all countries because there's quite a lot of countries that don't share information with us, and we don't get that correspondence. But for those that we did, Statistically speaking, there is an amount of UFO sightings that are seen every day on this planet, equals to about 1 every 8 seconds. And even if we do identify a small percentage of those as aircraft or misidentifications or even hoaxes, it still leaves a tremendous amount of UFOs seen through a period of 24 hours. Now we have to question, okay, where are all these UFOs coming from? Now, if we read the reports and look what we have them in transitions. We have them that objects were seen traveling from A to B at certain altitudes. And those tends to be the reports that we get in that they're monitoring the environment of some sort, be it scanning the ground or locations. Sometimes they're interacting with individuals or even animals in some cases. But one thing is certainly is that they seem to be in transition. They're doing a certain thing, going about their job, their agenda, whatever it is, and these things are seen during that process. What we don't tend to get is many reports of the locations where these things are manifesting or completely dematerialize into nothingness on many occasions. We've talked with SETI astronomers, and this is what was interesting, because when we asked them, and get me right here, these SETI astronomers aren't into ufology. They're not into UFOs. No, you talk about UFOs and they start to cringe. But, it's funny because even though that they are looking for extraterrestrial signals and have done for a considerable length of time, only over the last few months they're actually deciding to throw the cards in the bin and go about it in a completely different way. Because statistically speaking, they should have got many, many hits, and they're not. And their comment was, space is unusually quiet. Now, that's if you think about that comment, space is unusually quiet. You would expect that it should be teeming with life, because we know that from our situation, planet Earth, the way it is in this Goldilocks zone, where it's just about the right temperature, not too hot, not too cold, the right amount of gases and liquids, water being the most prominent for life, can cause life to flourish. And when it does, it can reach to a point where it reaches an intelligence level where it can start to transmit or receive information from one place to another in space. And that's those sort of signals we're looking for. And we would expect to have many of those. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. But when we question them about UFOs, and they cringe a little bit, like I say, where they're coming from, well, they agreed with me that if we were to have that amount of UFOs, and according to statistical surveys, we have a lot of sightings over a 24-hour period around the planet, reported that they must be traveling to Earth, and it must be a superhighway. For that amount of UFOs being seen, you'd expect a lot of traffic traveling back and forth. Now, traffic traveling backwards and forward to Earth kind of breaks the ether, you could say. It disrupts the radioactive levels of our higher atmosphere, the ionospheres and so on and so forth, which are detectable by radio telescopes. And we can pinpoint satellites very easily because of the movement through these upper layers of the atmosphere and even beyond. But we were not getting the information about saying, well, this is a superhighway of stuff going backwards and forwards here. They get little hits now and again, because we do know that there are things up there in high atmosphere and which are probably going about their business. But we'd expect to see a regular superhighway, and we don't. We don't get that information back. So for me, the question was, okay, where are they coming from? Research goes back to the days of Philip Corso. He was the gentleman that wrote the book The Day After Roswell. Or was it the day before Roswell? No, it was the day after Roswell. Sorry. Yeah. And in 1982, he made a reference that the United States government were looking at 5 major magnetic anomalies on the planet Earth, where ufological phenomena was taking place, or manifesting, we could say. Areas where they seem to materialize, go about the business, and sometimes relocate back to that location and dematerialize. This has been a sort of pet subject really since the latter 80s for me, and I'm trying to figure out what evidence there is to support that. If that is the case, and the US government are aware of these pockets where this phenomena is utilizing, then I would expect to find such areas through evidence, through people's witnessing these events.
Well, I just jump in really quickly there. Have you ever been up to Sedona, Arizona?
Oh, yeah, I have.
And there's a lady up there, Melinda Leslie. Now, Melinda is a contactee, and I think she comes from a family of abductees and contactees. Yes. And she takes you out on the tour, and she gives you a night vision, and you see them. I was having a conversation with her once, and she said there was a group, a number of couples showed up, and they wanted to come out and do the UFO tour. And one of the fellows said, "Do you notice that as they go across the sky, about over top of that geological feature, whatever it is, they just disappear?" And she says, "Yeah." And he looked at her and said it was a portal. Mm-hmm. And the other part of the group kind of huddled around, and they said, "Yeah, we're from NASA. We brought our wives here to see the portal."
Yes.
So when I was watching the groups of these little spots in the sky moving and reacting to our handheld laser pointers and things, mm-hmm. they were disappearing over the area. They said it was a portal, and I guess before that, people just assumed they were just getting too far out of sight. But they were going from bright to not existing, and then all of a sudden, things would pop out or just appear. So it made more sense that was a portal, and of course, if we believe Melinda and believe these people, NASA knew about it or knows about it because the employees came out to show their wives UFOs coming and going from a portal.
Yeah, it seems to be one of the most secret little things that they keep towards themselves in regarding the aspects of ufology. This isn't just random events. There's patterns, and over the years of most modern research now, we can say, yes, there are patterns in certain areas, certain locations, which NASA, the United States government and other governments have been aware of certain areas, not just throughout the United States, but worldwide, where these incidents occur. And what makes it very interesting is that it isn't just ufological stuff that takes place in those locations. We have a higher amount of paranormal reported incidents and a higher amount of cryptid types incidents, and get the last one, the most amount of disappearances, profound disappearances in the same locations. Mm-hmm. I think all you need to do is really talk with David Pilates on his missing 41111s to realize very quickly that the same locations where these profound disappearances have been taking place, and let's face it, there is quite a lot now. And when we say profound, I mean, 1 minute they're there, seconds later they're gone, or they're just profound, really profound. You couldn't work them out. They don't fall into normal physics as we know. Those type of incidents have been going on for a long time in the same areas, same locations of these, what you could refer to as high positive magnetic anomalies in association to these objects. But the problem for us is that we've been held back within these subjects. The ufologists have been forced into a box, and a lot of them don't tend to look outside into the other boxes, be it the supernatural, spiritual, paranormal, metaphysical. There are other aspects to the subject, and I don't think we can gather all the data and conclude by being sat in just the ufological box. We've got to tear down those other boxes and look at the subject as a whole. And that's what we've been trying to do, because we think the advancing of the subject, well, it's certainly not been it's been a disadvancement to us, really, because we had the UFO guys not even get into the paranormal. We had the paranormal guys say, I'm not interested in UFOs. And really, we were never going to get a full picture of what was really going on with this subject. But over the years, we've kind of realized that, especially over the last 5 years, is that there's definitely, without a shadow of doubt, a conscious connection between a lot of this aerial phenomena, true aerial phenomena, and the individuals, those observers of the phenomena. And it's really no different than the the double slit experiment, which was, it shows that when we actually are looking at an object, that it actually acts different because of the observation of it. I think it's initially put together by the Weizmann Institute of Science, and they conducted some highly controlled experiments demonstrating these beams of electrons and how they are affected. So if I put it in simple terms, if I've got a pencil in my left hand and a pencil in my right hand, and you look at the pencil in my right hand, then the actual atoms, the electrons within that pencil you're looking at, act differently than the pencil you're not looking at. We know that there's a very much likelihood that this connects into the paranormal realm. Without getting into the paranormal too much, if you investigate the poltergeist infestations, and there are people out there who have investigated these a long, long time, we discover that most actions, most incidents where things are being moved or thrown happen once you take your eyes off them or you're not looking in that direction. The theoretical science that's involved here is the fact that the phenomena itself can't conduct that act because of you've the restriction of the electrons because you're looking at them. It's exactly the same thing with the old pencil effect, really. If you actually look at what the electrons are doing when you actually look at these things, they're kind of held in space and time. They're kind of locked as like a round ball. And as soon as you take your eyes off them, they open up as like a string or wave pattern and fly off in different directions. It's as if like they got they can freely move to do so once you're not observing them. And when you observe them, they're kind of locked in location. Now, there could be the fact that poltergeist disturbances, actions that do happen, a lot of those incidents that happen, such as objects suddenly flew across the room, we didn't actually see it leave its place, but we knew it happened. The actual act took place. Could be because the fact is that we are restricting the action from taking place because we're looking at the objects. So we're kind of working in where the paranormal is somehow could be associated to the ufological aspect with this conscious connection. There's something which is connected, but once you're actually looking at something, there's something within those electrons that know that observation is taking place. And that could simply be that whoever is occupying, even the crafts themselves maybe, have an awareness to them that they are being observed at certain given times, which means that when you're out there investigating these things, and it's happened to us countless times all around the world, that sometimes they'll allow us to film them. Other times they'll do nothing. There's absolutely nothing going on until you put the cameras away in the trunk. And as soon as that happens, all hell breaks loose, or something is seen, or something manifests. But it wouldn't have done so because we had the cameras out. And that has been proven time and time again that they seemingly are aware of our actions, be it that we want to film them. It could be just different measures of intent. We know this from the 1980s because there was several orders given, the shoot-down orders by military pilots on some of these objects. And what happened was they were reporting that everything was going fine, normal procedure, until we put weapon lock on these things. And at that point, just prior to it happening, they did a highly evasive maneuver. The pilots weren't able to lock on. So they gained control. And of course, they try and put lock on again, and exactly the same thing happens again. They do this counter maneuver to stop that action. And the pilots were confused because it was as if they knew what was coming next.
Knew what the pilot was thinking before he actually physically hit a button.
Exactly. They measure the intent of the pilot. So it's just like measuring the intent of the observer. You might be on the ground videoing or photographing one of these things. You might be in the air as a pilot. But it seems to show enough evidence there now over the years gathered, and there are hundreds of accounts of this, if not thousands, from people who've attempted to film these things and they've not allowed them to, or they've only come out because suddenly they put the cameras away, or when pilots, suddenly take their fingers off the weapons lock button, there they are. And I guess it's frustrating, but at the end of the day, it shows that they have something of a form of conscious connection with the individuals. And of course, that phenomenon is capable of measuring the observer's intent. And now it could be because they want to measure the intent in case of harm or photography, filming. It could be numerous different reasons. But we do know now that the capabilities, they have a remarkable evasive measures that they can do, and we've filmed these, we've tracked these, we know how they're very clever. They even know how they perceive to us from the ground. Some of these objects have mimicked, and it was not purely by chance that Steven Spielberg put that little scene into his Close Encounters movie when they had these objects that made the Big Dipper, or the plow as we call it, the constellation, moving across the sky, because there was quite a lot of cases he actually reviewed, proper real cases, which he wanted to portray the subject of ufology as a real subject within that film. And that is why you have those poltergeist type effects taking place in the kitchen when all hell breaks loose when they're coming for that little boy, because there are reports of people having poltergeist type issues associated to ufological events. He really wanted to make sure he said it as the report said it. And we have accounts of UFOs which seemingly, from your angle, would be lost in the constellation because you think it's a star when it isn't. It's only when you get it from a different angle or it moves, you start to realize, this is no star, but it seemed to be so. Dual cameras now, which film in the infrared and the standard, show that some of these objects are actually cloak themselves with infrared, so that we can't visibly see them. But there are cameras that can do so. We know that infrared cameras have been out for quite some time. But there are cameras which film in dual lens now, or dual format, which will film the standard visual range as a normal camera would, as well as the infrared range. And we can put them both side by side. You can see objects moving across the sky in the infrared, and completely nothing on the left-hand side, showing normal visuals. So we know that they have the capabilities of, you could say, it's like the old days, isn't it, when watching old Star Trek, cloaking devices. I mean, it's all those theories from years ago, that we seem to hear about today. Cloaking devices, in other words, cloaking themselves from visibility, so they know our limitations, our visual limitations. But we also have the fact that there's a number of problems when people come to film these things, or even seeing these things, because psychology will tell you that we all kind of perceive slightly different. Nobody's exactly the same, to be honest with you. And there are certain things that can take place when these objects are seen in the sky. I mean, for instance, they can resonate at certain frequencies. If they resonate around about 18 hertz, that kind of matches the human ocular resonance, and it can cause objects to shimmer, when in fact we're saying they're shimmering when they're not. It's just our eyes see it that way. We can only tell you from how we perceive, you see. And of course, even the differentials in light can alter, because some of these things oscillate at a certain speed, the light sources, that when it gets around about 17 milliseconds, you can't work out if it's red, blue, green, orange. And you've got people glimpsing little sections of that and saying, well, it was orange, and this other person said, well, no, it wasn't, it was blue. It gets confusing, because these people have all seen the same thing but might report something slightly different. And most of all, we also know that they can generate an infrasonic sound. Now, we are limited again. We don't hear infrasound. Animals, birds, insects do. And we do know that they can generate certain frequencies. Again, it was shown in Spielberg's movie. When you have those incidents, and people have reported this, all of a sudden the crickets suddenly go deadly quiet. It's absolute, there's nothing around. And all of a sudden, something manifests, a UFO is seen, and so on and so forth. When you actually look at the data, there is actually what's actually happening here is that the crickets or the birds and so on and so forth go quiet because they're hearing an infrasonic sound. And that infrasonic sound, how crickets work, I mean, I've walked through cricket fields, and when you're walking through the long blades of grass, even just brushing through them, generates an infrasonic sound, which to them alerts them to go quiet because it's a predatory instinct act, and they just fall silent. And then after a while, the one will chirp and then the rest will start up again. But what we do is we have these masses of incidents where suddenly everything goes deadly quiet, strangely quiet. And of course, it would seemingly, it's the insects and birds of that location are picking up on the infrasonics. There's an infrasonic sound that's generated from the phenomena just at the time of experience or just prior. So we have monitored, and we've actually got some very low recordings of infrasonic sounds 48 hertz was one of them, which was coming from the west coast, I think it was the south coast, actually, of Ireland, which my colleague managed to capture at 48 hertz. So, and it's been associated to the UFOs, which have been seen throughout that vicinity. So they have a number of little tricks that you can do, and I think in some cases we are seeing the effects in the environment prior to seeing the objects, and this is why obviously sometimes people will report those strange things. But when I got involved in this, I mean, though I did my first investigation back in 1983 of a UFO sighting, I couldn't help. You can't help when you come full circle, because it didn't take me long to realize that there's more to it than what meets the eye. And there is so much of the paranormal realm which is associable to the ufological realm. And it doesn't, you don't have to do much research to figure that out. If we go back to 1918, for an example, Aleister Crowley was a very known occultist in the UK. And he was doing this particular type of seances. He actually went to Egypt to conduct these certain types of channelings and brought through a being in 1918, and he described this being. His name was Lam, Lam, and he claimed he was a being from another world, another reality. And he drew this, Aleister Crowley drew this, and he was a small grey being with a large head. And you got to take into consideration, this was in 1918. If we look at the skull experiments, now the skull experiments is something which is probably one of the most prolific studies of the paranormal through the process of mediumship and psychic abilities. It has taken place in a small town in Norfolk in the UK known as Skull, which produced some amazing discoveries in regarding the field of the paranormal and the manifestations of objects. Those objects were actually kept and put under analysis. These figures also turned up as well during the skull experiment and had large dark eyes and the typical scenario of an alien grey's face, and were claiming that they were coming through the other realities. So it would seem that the process of channeling wasn't just a matter of spiritual channeling, but there was also alleged ET channeling that was taking place as well. So it's kind of came hand in hand, one of the same thing. And that was also demonstrated by two women in America. One was Stella Lansing in 1961, and the other one was called Dorothy Izzat from 1974. And what was interesting about these two women, middle-aged women, housewives, they had the uncanny way of being able to capture UFOs, and not just UFOs, but light phenomena and strange beings, apparitions, ghostly manifestations on cinefilm. Both were used in 8mm cinefilm. And experiments took place, and they'd just be sat there, and all of a sudden they'd get this sudden urge to jump up and say, I've got to go outside and film. And they'd run the reel, and surely enough, they would capture strange things that defy scientific explanation. It's as if that these two women were touched some way in that they could seemingly look through the veil through to another reality, where these things are within that reality, be it these beings, the light phenomena, the UFOs, but both from completely two different places in the US, never knew each other, and of course, a spate of maybe 13 years apart, both doing exactly the same thing. Profound, no explanations whatsoever. Scientists couldn't even confirm how on earth they were managing to do it. The effects on the films was ridiculous, because the light phenomena and the UFOs would cross even from the frame to the next frame, and you could see it cut through the frame. Now, it shouldn't work like that. Anything in the physical world should be caught within that frame, and then it should be seen on the second photo. You could see it cross over the frames between, the void between the frames, and that was just profound. No explanation for it whatsoever. But those sorts of strange things, do defy rational explanations. And when we start to see in the 1970s paperwork coming out from the CIA, and this was quite interesting, because what happened is that the CIA decided decided to look into the UFO phenomena. What's all this UFO phenomena about? And they got some very interesting data back, and it took some time, and they started gathering their information. And when under the Freedom of Information Act, researchers obtained the documents, CIA documents pertaining to their investigations into ufological phenomena, they came across references such as WSFM. And nobody really knew at that time, what the hell does WSFM mean? And it's that researchers thought it was some type of secret program, or a new location, or project name, or something like that. And this went on for quite a number of years, scratching their heads, trying to. It only popped up now and again, but the same reference is always there, WSFM. And it took some years before people started to find out. And that's only because of whistleblowers, people who had worked for the CIA or associated to it under the studies of ufology, and came out and said, "Oh, we know what that WSFM means. It means weird science and freaking magic." And the reason did that because when you were looking at the subjects of ufology, it didn't fall into always the known physics as we know it. And it just did not know how to comment on that. They didn't know how to even begin to understand what was actually taking place, because what we're taught in our three-dimensional world is the physics, the reality of physics as we know it. When something doesn't fall into that, there is no referencing for it. So they're just between inner departments of the CIA, they had this jokingly reference backwards and forwards, this weird science and freaking magic, WSFM, which was referencing on these sheets because they couldn't understand some of the physics that are involved in the study of ufology as a whole. So we do know right from an early stage that we've always probably been dealing with something which is a little bit more than just a craft traveling in, throughout space, traveling the distances to planet Earth. And we found over a period of time that even though there seems to be certain references, we're using actually two pieces of software, and this would be good for the listeners, because we always encourage people to take part and utilize these. There is the well-known piece of software, which is known as Google Earth, which people utilize on their computers quite commonly. But there are two filters you can get for Google Earth, and these are referred to as KMZ filters. Now, these filters you can download, and one of them is known as the EMAG, and that's Earth's Magnetic Anomaly Graph, EMAG2. And that is a small downloadable filter that you can apply to Google Earth. And when you do so, it will show you planet Earth being scanned by a satellite in orbit of the positive and negative magnetic regions across the planet. There is also another one, a second one, it's also helpful, which is known as the Global Grav. And it's about gravity, global gravity, KMZ filter, again for Google Earth Pro. And all you do is you download it. They're free. You can download them. And that one will show you the gravitational anomalies around the planet. Now, when you cross-reference these, and I've always said to people have done this, been doing this for quite some time now, actually, go and look at the biggest cases around the world. Just pile them all up. Look at the locations, look at the graph, look at the Earth's magnetic anomalies, and see what's taking place in those locations. And you'd be surprised at the considerable amount of incidents, major UFO incidents, that have taken place in positive magnetic regions. You can date right back to 1952, the Flatwoods Monster incident in Braxton County in Virginia, a positive magnetic anomaly, or the Hopkinsville encounter in Kentucky in 1955, positive magnetic anomaly. It's exactly the same for Skinwalker Ranch. It's in a very potent positive magnetic anomaly. Even Point Pleasant, where the areas of the Mothman incidents took place. Poor Travis Walton had no chance. He was in the heart of a magnetic anomaly. Not a chance. He was in a massive one. The small Broadhaven UFO school incidents that took place in Wales, or the UFO scene. There's the Lonnie Zamora case, and the aerial school UFO encounter in Rua, the giant rock incidents. It just goes on and on and on, and you can look at thousands, and you start to scratch your head. You go, hang on a second, this can't be coincidence. There's got to be a correlation between UFOs and these positive magnetic regions. And when you cross-examine that against the disappearances, which is under David Palladie's excellent research, you'll exactly see the same thing. That these sort of areas are problematic areas where phenomena takes place. Heightened paranormal incidents, cryptid sightings, strange disappearances, and an immense amount of UFO incidents recorded. And this goes on for quite a lot. We've been doing this research now for 3 years in on the 5-year program. We know where we can go. And this is what we've been doing over the last year or two, is making set locations, going there, witnessing the phenomena take place, witnessing the manifestation of phenomena take place. So for us, it's more of the evidence would push towards what this phenomena is utilizing areas on planet Earth as opposed from just traveling towards it. I do know that they traverse around. We all know that. They have the capabilities of traversing in space, in the air, probably underwater. And it's not just a matter of traversing. There is arrival locations and there are dissipation locations. And what also that we found is, and we found this purely accidentally actually, is we were doing some research, and a colleague of mine was in the hospital and had gone to visit a friend who'd had an operation. And he was put onto a recovery ward. And this recovery ward only had one door, enter the ward, one exit, it's the same door. But this door was unlike any other door in the hospital. This door had a positive magnetic field around it. And he was very curious because he wanted to kind of think, well, that's interesting. Why is he pushing a strong positive magnetic field around the door? And we had to do some research about the door manufacturing, actually. And it turned out that they're utilizing these now in hospitals because it's very difficult for bacteria to cross. It's a kind of a bacterial free zone. Keeps it a bacterial free zone. Bacteria doesn't cross it. It can even kill bacteria, the positive magnetics. So, interesting enough, when we look at these locations on planet Earth, these positive magnetic regions, we also have to say they're also pretty void of bacteria. Well, certainly less bacteria in those areas than other locations around the planet. So where these objects are manifesting from are in areas of low or next to zero bacteria and or leaving in those locations. So it's a bit like a surgeon, who washes his hands before he goes and has to do the operation. And what's he do as soon as he comes out? He washes his hands again. It's seemingly these locations are not just hotbeds for activity, but they're also connected with the lack of bacteria in those locations as well, which again falls under the science. So what we're trying to do here and kind of figure out, well, hang on a second, what is really going on in those locations? Are there portals? Now, I know you said this before, James, about portals, and people have referred to these. And to be honest, I will say I hate the name portal. I hate the name Stargates because it's just very sci-fi to me. It's kind of a sci-fi. And as soon as you start mentioning those very much sci-fi names within good research, people start rolling their eyes. But is there a real proper name for these? Because there definitely seems to be something taking place. We know it happens at Skinwalker. In fact, my colleague was there in October 2019, just a few months ago, and phenomena is still taking place there. Now we've got the video footage and the photographs and the gunshots that they're trying to shoot these things in the middle of the night. It's still taking place. But they won't shoot. They'll never kill these things, but they're shooting at them, and the phenomenon is still there. It's just moved to perimeter of Skinwalker. It's moved a little bit further out. The more because these things are evasive at the end of the day. They don't want mess. They don't want trouble. They just want to go about their business and don't want nosy people turning up with cameras and you're doing tests and things. So they try to evade their best. So they've moved off the main part of the ranch to the perimeter of the ranch. But it's still happening, and it's still manifesting.
There's a place that I'm going to go to possibly in mid-August, and it's called the Blind Frog Ranch. It's 12 miles away, and they have the same activity there. Yeah. And there's not a great big fence around it with guards on golf carts. Because, frankly, something of that nature isn't going to be deterred by a fence or a property line. So it's the area itself. It's one specific lot.
No. It was never the ranch at Skinwalker. I mean, though this stuff did interact with people in the ranch in a paranormal sense, in regarding poltergeist type stuff that was going on there and trickery. I mean, there's just two things that this phenomenon represents. And I absolutely guarantee that from spending 38 years in the field, is that it's deceptive. And it plays tricks, and it's not what you think it is, on many occasions. And it seemingly seems to have or represent itself in numerous different ways. I've always said, along with my colleague, that we're dealing with the same phenomenon, but it just has so many masks. And this is what makes it very difficult, because it seemingly has been a phenomenon that, well, it may even predate biblical history or documented history. It could have been going on for longer than that. I mean, they may have been here even before us. We may be the new kids on the block for all we know. One thing for sure, it's not a new phenomenon. And what another thing is that it doesn't seem to traverse through a technologically traversed. In other words, we can see the difference in our machines, our technology. Aircraft and planes are just with a 20-year gap. Just 20 years later, we can see our advancements in technology. This phenomenon is seemingly stays the same. These discs, objects, and things like that are referenced hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and are still being seen today. Now, a perfect example is one the Heflin 1957 photograph of a hat-shaped UFO, which is exactly the same from the 1998 Southport, UK photograph. They're identical. If I was to show you both of them, you'd say it's the same object. But how can that be? Why do they not change over the years? Maybe it's just a point that they don't think like us, or they already have reached perfection. One of the things is that it's certainly different than our technology, because our technology, we see the advancements just within 10 or 20 years. We can tell when there's a new car come out, or a new vehicle, because it's, hey, look, it's got the latest tech on it and it looks different. But it doesn't seem to happen with this phenomenon, and that's what's most profound. But when I mention
That's what I found. Yeah. I was talking to Bob Lazar. I had a real brief conversation with Bob Lazar one day, and the UFO that I can't remember if it was the one he was working on at S4. He claimed he was working on at S4. Was found in an archaeological dig and was estimated as going down 10,000 years ago.
Yes,
and it was the same as the other ones that were recently found in the last 50 years.
Yes, these are things that have been going. They're a lot older than what we think. But it's just different. It's a different type of tech. It's a different type of physics that's involved. But one thing is for sure is that this is not new. But what we tend to be seeing today, though, is really our aspects of how we deal with this phenomenon in modern tech world, 21st century now. People want answers. The thing is, though, we have to really go back a long, long time to consider where we even begin with this. And if they are, like we say, these areas where they're locating to on planet Earth, that might represent the reasons why they say look after planet Earth. I don't think they care about us, to be honest, James, too much. They're quite happy to sit back and let us war over the planet for thousands of years. They don't seem to be too bothered about us, but they certainly seem to be bothered about the planet. And I often think to myself, well, that may be a good reasons why if they're utilising it. If their way their ticket is in to our planet through these different locations, then we have to say, well, are they jumping from reality to reality? And when you start to look at these ideas about reality, more and more evidence is coming forward. In fact, there was Dr. Lisa Randall from Harvard University, and she was quoted in saying, I believe an extra dimensional a dimension may exist close to our familiar reality, hidden except for a bizarre sapping of strength of gravity as we see it. In other words, they're right here. Now, the governments of the world will want us to look up and want us to ponder on which planet these things are coming from. But the problematics of that is that it might not be that. And might actually be right under our noses, right here, right now, and we wouldn't even be aware of it. And this is how sometimes this phenomenon reacts. No different than the paranormal, of course. Sometimes these suddenly manifest, and of course people will experience those things. And when they have done on some occasions, manifested, even those sightings at night whilst travelling vehicles, there have been reports of the headlights of the vehicles bending towards the objects as they've manifested. And any physicist will tell you that that is evidence of a gravitational well, a gravitational field, something being sapped out of our own gravity. There's an altar there. And of course, it's interesting to hear these Smithsonian Institute guys who talk about these professors that have come forward, like the one from Harvard University. It said it's hidden except for a bizarre sapping of gravity. And what we know now is that the evidence of these gravity wells, when they manifest, sometimes it seemingly are affecting the locations. A residue takes place, but it doesn't seem to last for very long. Probably 24, 48, 72 hours at the most. But they can be detectable. There are pieces of equipment which can look for unusualities, gravitational wells, gravity anomalies, and testing that visually. Because you can always look at meters and say, yes, that's interesting, that's a spike, or it's not acting as it should be, and so on and so forth. But it's not. For the general folk out there, they want to see something visually of this. How do you do that? If you can get to one of those locations where these things are manifesting, then you can run a number of tests. And the easiest visual test to do is just to get your stereotypical laser pen, which ufologists use them to point them up in the sky, and interact with these types of things. You can fix them to a tripod, and move it through the affected area. So in other words, if you think this locality is the location where this thing was close to the ground, then you set it up on a tripod, you fire the laser through the affected area onto a large target, roughly a couple of meters wide, and you watch it drift off target backwards and forwards, because gravity affects light. In fact, light cannot escape gravity, any form of gravitational anomaly. A gravity well will pull it. And this is what was happening in these cases which were being reported, where people said the beams of the headlights at night suddenly shot and bent. They'd never seen anything like it. These beams of light, they bent from the car and seemingly were heading towards this object, which seemingly was manifested in the field as they were driving past. And this has been reported on a number of occasions, quite a few times, which would suggest a gravity well is taking place there, anomaly there, at the time of this thing manifesting. And if it does, then it likely could leave a residue behind, and that's a way of measuring it. Apart from being equipment, a visual method would be to watch for the movement of a laser, because that it's like a string of a bow. When you pull on it slightly and then it goes back, you'll see it drift off target left and right. And when you start to see that, that means that the light is being affected by can only be gravity. But they are short-lived. 24, 48 hours probably at the most. We've been the ones on 72 hours, and we haven't really got anything. So we can say maybe up to 48 hours is probably best to dissipate quite quickly. But it would seem a residue is left behind from that action. And if you want to look into Einstein's theories of that, it would seem that two things can't exist in the space of time at the same time. Something has to be taken out for something to put there. And of course, the sudden manifestation of something there's a reduction in the gravity, and of course there's a gravity well. It's very interesting, the science behind it. But what we're trying to define here is new areas of research, because if these things are coming through from somewhere else, then they are theoretically interdimensional. Now, a lot of people are talking about this theory now, more so than the extraterrestrial hypothesis, is the interdimensional extraterrestrial hypothesis, because it's very all long-worded. But if these things are coming from off-world, it's only been a theory that they live on another planet. We've had references from them. They said, oh, well, I come from this planet and I come from that planet. But the problems of that is that there seems to be a common thing that's said. Now, let's take for an example, according to tens of thousands of reports worldwide, it's possible that a single phenomenon, it could be a single phenomenon, is at play. Now, if we look at the statistics, there's been over 2,000 different types of entities reported. 2,000 different types of entities, completely different. Small ones, large ones, hairy ones, insect-looking ones, humanoid-looking ones, things that just look like robots and all sorts of different things. About 2,000 different types of entities have been reported. Now, if we just look at the grey itself, there's been over 30 varied types of greys alone have been reported, being varied colour from brown to a blue to a grey. Obviously, slight different heights. Ones with tails, one with long dark hair. So if you take the African school incident, if you start to write all these down, you find it's like 30 different varied greys alone. And then, of course, you've got that common denominator there, and that common denominator is that phrase, "Look after the planet." That seems to be the thing to say. They don't really tell us much more than that, really, it would seem. Most people get that. We're going to show you images of disaster, or we're going to show you that. It's like that's the given thing, to tell us, look after planet Earth. But the problem of this is that the more you go back, the phenomena seems to shift and change. Though it's the same phenomena, it's just a different mask. It's a different thing. I mean, the jinn and the archons, are no different than the demons and the daemons, and are no different than the greys or other types of beings which have been seen. It's seemingly the same phenomena, but seems to be a different mask that's used. And it goes back a long time. Now, what we're finding out today is that for some profound reason, and this is where we are currently up to in our research, for some profound reason, phenomena evades iron. Now, we are conducting experiments in the resonant frequency of iron to see if something within the resonant frequency of iron is associable to the dysfunction of the phenomena acting in certain cases. Now, we also know from hundreds of years ago that iron was used with farmers. Farmers were banging iron rods into fields in Ireland and in Scotland in the 1800s to ward away things that came in the night and took the sheep or killed their cattle. And they were banging iron rods into the ground, and apparently seemingly worked. And then we see the iron nails in the 15th century being used to ward away bad spirits at night, hammered into floorboards around beds, or across doorways. We also see the use in the 16th century, even earlier probably than that, in the late 15th century, of the horseshoe. Now, the horseshoe is nothing to do about referencing what is lucky or not. It's the iron, which was placed over doorways. It was to keep the spirits out, or keep the things out that they didn't want coming in. In medieval times, they even went as far as perimetering churches and cathedrals with wrought iron, to separate the realms of reality. The iron rods were placed across cribs to stop children from being abducted in Ireland during the 13th century. If you want to go to Brazil, South America, they were utilising hematite, to ward away bad spirits. So if you look at hematite, it's about 80 to 90% iron ore is in them. So there's something going on with iron. I'm not particularly too sure, but it seems to be at least 30 countries have took up the same idea of utilising iron for some reason or another against those things that might come in the night, or those things that might descend from the sky, one of the two. So we start to see little patterns. I mean, if we go back to the days of John Keel, now he was a very well-known researcher. He wrote quite a lot of books. He was involved in the Mothman Prophet cases. And he wrote a book called The Eighth Tower, where he referred to, be it the ufological beings or the cryptids or the paranormal, he referred to them as ultra-terrestrials, was a kind of the name he created at that time, and believed that the phenomena utilizes different light sources, be it that the infrared or the ultraviolet, and different types of entities come through different areas of that light visibility, which is interesting because that concept has even gone through to modern day, where people have reported that getting rid of certain paranormal phenomena, what they've done is introduce iron and introduced ultraviolet lights, and it seemingly has worked. And it still continues to seemingly work to help rid disturbances, unwanted paranormal disturbances in homes. And it's even doing today. It was actually still happening last month. A case of ours was closed, after having no experiences in there for several months, after utilizing those two things. And of course, it seemingly has assisted. Now, it may be that there's some form of actionable thing taking place in that environment through the power of belief by those that live in the environment. So there's always that to take into consideration. We can never rule that out. But then, we also have to consider under experimental conditions would we see a diminish in activity. Well, the problematic is that if you remove the individuals, you remove their reporting of it and their perceptions of it, which means that you don't get many reported incidents of paranormal phenomena or from an electronic point of reason. You may get people say, oh, well, I've caught this and I've caught that on camera, but it's very, very difficult when it comes to analysing them to say, yes, there's a certainty that they are strange and profound. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to advance the subject in new areas of research now for the UFO phenomena. It's the 21st century, for the 21st century ufologist. And yes, though we do cover in educational programs that we are involved in, that the aspect of doorways, you could say, people might refer to them as portals and stargates. We try and steer away from things like that. I mean, even NASA, have admitted recently that they've looked into portals between Earth and the Sun. Now, these are referred to as electron diffusion regions. Now, these electron diffusion regions are, in fact, portals. This is the best way to describe them. And they open and close, and some of them are very large, and some of them are sustained. There is rumours that the MMS mission, which consisted of 4 NASA satellites, those rumours were circulated a couple of months ago that they actually sent one of those through one of these electron diffusion regions, and it allegedly appeared 93 million miles away near the Sun. The problem is, like anything with rumours, it's very hard to get to the crux of the matter of where it came from, that information, and how true it is. But one thing is for sure is that they launched 4 of these satellites for the investigation. It's known as the MMS mission, the investigation of portals, electron diffusion regions outside Earth. And there are plentiful, apparently. There are lots of them. And they've been investigating these now for probably around about 5 years. So, I mean, theoretically, I think if I was a scientist, I'd probably pop one of those satellites through myself and find out and see where it comes out. And if that is the case, then we have to question, well, if it is, then it's kind of tracked to 93 million miles away to the Sun. And if that is the case, then we have to start looking at the SOHO satellites and saying, what are all those objects that seem to be coming out of the Sun, or around the Sun? I mean, maybe that this phenomena can, the transition of travel is through magnetic regions. And the Sun is one huge, huge magnetic region. It's compared to Earth, it's nothing. It's huge. And maybe the star hoppers, maybe that they utilize these areas from traversing from one location to another. It's a whole completely different physics we may be dealing with. But what we've done is we've decided to action all these different locations where research is needed and what's required to do so. And we've also put forward, the new information regarding the cattle mutilation phenomena, for an example, though people cringe a little, I suppose you get a lot, still get reports of that even nowadays, don't we, James, of mutilations?
A few, primarily down southwest U.S. Still, yeah.
Well, there was an incident that took place some years back in Norway, and what was interesting is that some hikers were walking over the hills, and they came across around about 300 dead deer, and they started to film it on their phones and cameras, and they were absolutely shocked. And these weren't just all huddled together; these were, they were spread out over about a mile, and which is a lot, like a huge amount. And what they didn't see is any live deer. They didn't see any; they were all dead. And they reported it to the authorities, and the authorities came out, and the Forestry Commission people did, and they reported it because that information had already got out, these individuals, hikers, had discovered it. They reported it as a lightning strike. That the lightning strike had hit. Now, this is over a mile radius. Yeah. It's over 300 deer. Some of those deer are on top of each other. And probably what's most alarming is the fact a third of the amount of the deer were missing their heads. Antlers were left behind in some cases. And there didn't seem to be any blood spill around neither, and of course it was completely and utterly covered up if that was the case. Now, it's not the first time we've heard of cases like this. I mean, I've got cases here on my desk, from cattle being found in trees. They've been dropped from height. They are being dropped from height on many occasions, and they're breaking limbs and they fall and stuff, But I think most pathologists will agree that the animals are alive at the time of mutilation, and it's not a very nice thing to talk about, but it's the fact that some of these things are associated to the UFO phenomena, and when we start to look at the reasoning maybe right behind this is it could simply fall down into the immune system, because every species, we all have an immune system, and it helps fight off infections and pathogens and diseases, and it's a vital component to any immune system, which are these mucous membranes, you could say. We all have them, and they lie mostly in the soft tissue. Now, it's interesting when you say soft tissue. Most of the mucous membranes lie in soft tissue, and where do we find that? Around the eyes, the nose, the tongue, the mouth, the rear end, soft tissues on animals. We know where those are. And the total area of mucosa is around about 400 meters squared. So you can see there's quite a lot of it. So if you consider the skin surface is it's about 2 meters square as an example, then it demonstrates the fact that that how vital they actually are. So when in a situation that creates fear, so in other words, if we are stressed and we're fearful, that fight or flight kicks in, not just in us but in animals. That response kicks in as very automatically. It's just like a survival mode, we could say. Now, what happens is, any pathologist will tell you, it releases adrenaline and noradrenaline and cortisol, and they are vastly released into the bloodstream. And our immune system is completely impelled and mobilizes with increased activation. So in other words, it's like quadruples the amount of into the immune system at the time of fear. Now we have to question, is that what's happening with these animals? Because, you find it within soft tissue and you find it in the blood. This is where the mucous membranes are. This is how to get the mucosa. This is how to study and try and obtain information regarding potent immune systems. We have to question if that's taking place now, because, when we first looked into the cattle mutilation phenomena, many years ago when Linda Moulton Howe, who's a good friend of mine, who actually looked into this subject quite heavily, I don't know if enough work was done at that time to look into the immune system. Could it have been the immune system that is really what's going on here? But what I can tell you is that that's not a new phenomenon either. I talked with a gentleman, and he's an Indian gentleman in his 60s, and he said not his father, his great-grandfather. So we're talking 3 generations back here. In India, he said, my grandfather was sent out into the fields running to get cattle in and goats in and things like that, because the lights would come down from the mountains. And if you didn't have your animals in, then, they're likely to be killed or taken. One of the two, they were usually found mutilated. Now, if this is 3 generations ago and taking place in a small town in India where the lights used to be seen coming down from the mountains and heading towards the fields, and they were rushing out to get the animals in, how long has this been going on for? This, again, is not a new phenomenon if that is the case. And there are some significantly old cases throughout Ireland, even in Dublin. The head office in Dublin, the government building, has got some documentation there from the 13 and 1400s regarding cattle mutilations that have taken place with farmers across the Irish community. There are some really old documentations about it. So what we've been doing over the last year or so is that we wanted to look at what information is actually out there, James, and in regarding the subject of ufology, and where can we go now? Do we need a new study of this phenomenon? Yes, we do. And we need to employ people to look at the aspects of the paranormal as well. And is there commonality between some incidents and cryptids? I mean, are these guys really animals that live as an animal? Because, there are many people or trackers that will say, well, if you want to look for a large Bigfoot, for an example, you follow the food source, because large animals use large amounts of food. And though that they are physical in nature, there are people that will argue that these things have been seen to demanifest. Sometimes they've been heard and not seen. Sometimes they've seemingly appeared in a location as if to clear that location, and they've been seen countless times in association to strange lights and UFOs. Nobody really knows for sure. The community is divided, James, into those Bigfoot researchers that say, yeah, this is real animals and they're out there, and the other half of the community that say, well, I don't know. I think, are they manifested? Are they some type of creature or associated to UFOs? The subject's divided.
And that's and I'm one of those people, because I used to and I still associate with a lot of internationally well-known psychics who have kind of contact with odd beings out there, and it's both. I have a great opinion. I have an opinion that it's both. Yeah. There's a group of we'll call them extraterrestrials, for the lack of a better label, that are protecting those that are the animal.
Yes. Yeah, it could only be. I agree.
Because I got lucky enough to have. Do you know a lot of psychics, or a number of psychics?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, I want you to. This is a project. Next time you're talking to one, ask them, because a lot of them, they'll tell you they communicated with the spirit guides or whatever their guide they talked to. 2014, 2015. This kind of goes blanket for very active psychics right around the world. That guide stepped back, and they claim an ET came in, an extraterrestrial being came in. And I had the opportunity to interview one of the psychics guides, this ET, who told us that when I said, well, Bigfoot real, it basically said, well, yeah, but there's a thing called an echo, EKKO, not the echo like we hear when we talk, but this being is here to protect the animal, the critter that's the Bigfoot. And that's the one you see stands behind a tree and you run around the tree and it's not there. Or it's a diversion. It goes off in one direction while the family of Bigfoot or Sasquatch is running off in the other one. Yeah. But it's there to protect and keep us away from the actual being, the animal, the cryptid itself. And it's doing that because it needs to preserve that DNA, that original DNA.
I agree. There's got to be a separate source here. I mean, it's not always going to fall. It's a problem with these subjects, James, is that, there's always the opposing is a typical example. The UK has 134 incidents reported of Bigfoot incident sightings. The UK is not big enough to sustain a Bigfoot.
No, yeah, what are they going to eat?
Yeah, it's this. You travel 53 miles in any direction, you're going to hit the sea in the UK. I mean, there's a small park which is literally 3 miles away from me. It's only half a mile wide. And three independent individual witnesses of a Bigfoot incident in the park. So feasibly, that's in the middle of Manchester. It's a built-up city. It's just, why would anything want to, because we just wouldn't have one living there, and it's very difficult. The UK is so small and an island that we wouldn't expect to have animals living like that. We would have to eat a considerable food source. It would be trackable, very easy, identifiable across the UK. We just don't have that area to hide in. And yet we have 134 incidents. We have them in residential areas. We have them in built-up city areas, and they just don't make any sense. So when we look at them, we have to say that's got to be something else. And what is that something else? Now, most people have reported, a lot of people have reported UFO activity. Some of them have reported them in association to these creatures, whatever they are or what they represent. If there's a bluff going on, then the phenomenon itself has got a bit mixed up, because he didn't need to do it in the UK. He could probably get away with North America maybe, but in the UK it would have been a bit of a wasted act, but he's still doing it either way. But this is not the problem that we have when we're dealing with the subject of UFOs, because we've got so many different doorways that are going to open, where you could take the research into different locations of what they want to do within the subject of ufology. So we look,
Manchester itself has it's a bit of a hot spot for UFOs, and people,
it is.
A lot of times, there'd be an Air Force base around. Well, Burtonwood, RAF Burtonwood closed in '94. Yeah. That would have been about the closest one. Other than that, there's one, Menwith Hill is northeast, way just north of Leeds.
That's right.
So it's not that close.
No.
So, so why? Liverpool's a port city. It's down the road, but it may have some military something going on there.
Yeah, it doesn't really add up. That's the problem. And this is what you find all the time. You think that we're actually going to get somewhere close, and sometimes it takes you at a fork in the road. The problem is that, with so many people doing different areas of research, we wanted to kind of bring them together. Who are the people out there who have really got the finger on the trigger in regarding research of where we're going in the future? So what we did, James, is we managed to contact those people around the world. We looked at the best courses that are out there. And, there were a lot of different ones, varied ones. MUFON, we looked at MUFON's course, and we thought, okay, there were some aspects of ufology that really do need to be put into the courses now, because it's changed. It's not like it used to be, ufology, and there's so many new areas of research now, especially the magnetic anomalies, and you can go out and witness this firsthand, and you can utilize specialized equipment to do so, and utilizing what technology we have with satellites now. We wanted to create a new course, and we did. We called it the UITC, the UFO Investigator Training Course, and Project Doorway, the 3 years of the five-year program is in there, in the course with it, and we've just been in talks with MUFON actually, and they've taken the course on board and approved it, and they're going to be putting it into their store for distribution as a reference guide. It's about 300 pages long, and it's a color guide. It's a very glossy, full book color guide, but it also comes with updates which continue, because I've always argued the point: the phenomena never stands still. We're always learning new things. So whoever gets these courses have to get updates. They have to, because the phenomenon is never going to stay in the same place. So we expect to keep up with that.
Well, and that's a brilliant way of dealing with it, because if you, for anybody who's been in the military or even a lawyer, when you get law, in the back of that book, it's made for updates.
It is. It is. That's it. Yeah.
And it's fun. It's the oddest thing. We have school. We have a textbook, and that textbook may be updated every 10 years. If you're lucky. Yeah. But to have something where you can actually continue to add because this is I almost hate to say science, but the investigation into these phenomena is fluid. And you cannot stand still. And you and I know this from going to conferences around the world where people want to interact and ask questions, and they're looking for answers that fit their belief system.
That's right. It is. It's kind of the other way around, really. Yeah, they're trying to look for the information to fit to their belief system, where I've always said to people, look, just drop aside the belief system. Let's look at what is happening here. Let's see what physics we do have, and what we don't have, let's see what we've learned from those people who have looked in elsewhere. Because that information, there is some really good information out there, and sometimes bringing it together is sometimes, people just don't know where to look for it these days. I mean, it's so vast, the internet now, and you don't know what's disinformation across the internet neither these days. It's so problematic. But there is lots of areas where it does require parapsychology. It does require some paranormal attributes into the course, because it falls under that. The subject falls under that, so therefore we have to say it for what it is. And though that we are working on other courses of paranormal and metaphysical, but the attributes within the ufological course will take the investigator into the subcategories of the paranormal when necessary. I mean, here's a typical example, which I'll finish on the course identification stuff, is that when we had an incident in 2006, which was investigated as a poltergeist disturbance, a mug apported, disappeared for over 90 minutes, turned up in the middle of the carpet in the lounge area, in plain sight. How anybody could have seen it, I do not know. But there it was in all its glory, and slightly warmer to the touch. Identical to the mug that sat in the kitchen, there's a set of 4 of them, in fact. We managed to have that mug analysed, microscopy, at Lancaster University. And the result came back was very interesting. When you look at the mug that was the apported mug against the other mug, which was, they've come from a set of 4, so they're all identical. It weighed the same, roughly. It looks the same. It feels the same. Under the microscope, it wasn't. Under the microscope, it showed that there'd been a diathermic reaction take place through the apported mug. So what might you see and feel, and it looks like it, might not actually be the very mug it disappeared. And this is where it starts to get very interesting, because when we wrote down the information back from the analysis on what type of diathermic reactions took place in the apported mug and why it would happen, we'd seen these figures before. We'd seen the references before. And I'll tell you where we saw it. We saw it in the biological trauma of plants in association to UFO manifestations close to the ground. I put that in layman's terms. A UFO is manifested close to the ground. It's affected the plant growth. When you take the plant growth and analyze it, it shows you the same diathermic reactions inside, which means the very likelihood of an apportation of a mug and the manifestation of a UFO are utilizing the very same physics. Now that is where it starts getting very interesting, because there's a mechanics behind it. And if there's a mechanics behind it, it means that we can find new areas of research. And this is what we want to do. And this is what we're trying to do with the subject as best we can, James. I mean, I'm going to be over in LA in next weekend at the Conscious Life Expo, which I've been running a UFO workshop there, and I think I'm on the UFO panel there as well. But I get around as much as I possibly can, James. I get to the States quite a lot, contact in the desert and numerous other places. And I'm trying to say to people, sometimes you've got to empty half the glass and fill it up again, because we can't stay in the same place. This subject is becoming more prominent by the day, especially after the US release of information over the last 2 years now, and people are asking more and more questions, and who's got the answers is the question, and people are still scratching their heads, because they're still looking at the 1950s and 1960s, 70s and 80s idealism of UFO investigation, which is stuck. It's stuck in a rut. And I think, obviously, these new areas of research will actually help advance the study of where we're actually going to get in trying to figure out what the hell is going on with these things, where they're coming from, how they're getting here, and what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve. Is it simply that they just want to get be able to live amongst us permanently. Is that what it is at the end of the day? And with the immune system, they certainly seem to have an agenda, and it's fixed. But the fact is, they've been at it a long time, if that is the case, because these guys are, they seem to have been around for a long time. So, and that's what makes it so fascinating, the subject, because, certainly when you think you've got your finger on the button, something else comes up where there's a fork in the road. And this is what you find. This is what you find, not just in the paranormal, in the ufological as well. So, but it's interesting.
I find where there's a fork in the road, you go down that road, there's 3 more forks.
Yeah. There always is, James. It keeps us very busy.
Well, I want to thank you. We have been with Steve Mera. Now, Steve is the director of, if anybody wants to zip over to phenomenamagazine.co.uk. He's the director of Phenomena Magazine online. And when you were talking about Project Doorway and things like that, and your partner that investigates, is that Barry Fitzgerald?
It is, yeah. Most people will know Barry Fitzgerald from the Ghost Hunters International series, which went out across the US. He was one of the lead investigators of that show. But Barry's interest really wasn't always in the paranormal. It was in ancient sites and ufology as well. So he's been a colleague working with me now for a number of years, and some fascinating research he does.
Now, you put an end date on your Project Doorway.
Yes,
a 5-year. What?
Well, well, this is the first stage. I mean, the idea was, you see, before Project Doorway it was a Phenomena project, and that'll be for a whole new show, to be honest with you.
Yes.
I will talk about my kind of 15, 16 years involved in the parapsychological research, and really, you've got to do them both. You've got to do the studies in both to realise we are dealing with what's one similar type of phenomena here, or a phenomena that is utilising the same source, how it interacts in quantum physics and reality and so. So we decided to do Project Doorway after doing 5 years with Phenomena Project. Went to Project Doorway. It was all about the ancient sites, all about ufology. How far does it really go back, this phenomena? Who were these ancient people worshipping? What are these resonant chambers? Why was monatomic powder used? And also these are wonderful little subjects. This is all within Project Doorway. Now, it's more modern science regarding ufology, but it really goes back in time to the ancient days. And that is a 5-year study, which we're 3 years in. We've had to travel all over the world. We've just come back from visiting 19 sites in Malta. And it's really interesting. And there's a big thing in here about terahertz frequency of light, which is coming from the sun, the setting sun, the rising sun, why light source is important, why resonant frequencies of vocal sounds are important in certain key locations of ancient sites where phenomena manifest. The ancients knew a lot more than we did, surprisingly, on that matter. But we've got another couple of years to do. Still got a lot more traveling to do. And once we gather that data, then we have to distribute it in kind of a mass load there, because we want to be able to conclude as much as we possibly can, and then we may actually go on to another one. It just depends on what doorways open us, really, as we conduct research. We are finding that there is a mechanism. There's a mechanism in the paranormal. When objects move in poltergeist mass infestations, there's a measurement that can be taken. Same numbers seem to turn up time and time again. There's a mechanism. There's a rule book. And we believe that there's certain mechanisms within the ufological aspects as well. So we're just going to highlight them and allow people our path to go and investigate further. And we are really pushing. I've talked to some of the biggest researchers around the world. I've been on the phone with Jacques Vallée. I've been on the phone with Richard Dolan, and quite a number of other people in regarding a new scientific inquiry into the subject of ufology is really demandable. It really needs to take place, because we can bring so much more to the table now than we can when we did do in the 1970s. So much more. And we can really start looking into, metamaterial analysis, which results will start coming through, implant analysis, which are coming through, which coincidentally they both actually are 4% differentials in isotopic levels on both of them, which means that they both come from the same source. But people will start putting the pieces together over a period of time. So we are getting there, James. It's a long battle uphill, but the whole idea is to take ufology into the next level, really, for the 21st century ufologist.
Yeah, and that's where it needs to go. It can't be the stagnant, and we have to teach people. What am I saying? We have to, educate people to understand that. Don't try to, force this round peg into a square hole of your beliefs. Keep your mind open and take information as it is presented, and take it, digest it, and ask questions. Unlike what I've done today, not asking any questions, but I sat through your lecture. This is a good one, and it's fascinating. My listener, I'm sure, absolutely loved it too. Again, if you want to see any of the stuff Mr. Steve Mera has put together in his books, The Paranormal Investigator's Handbook, Strange Happenings, Paranormal Insight, The Rochdale Poltergeist, and The House of Fire and Whispers, investigating a Seattle Demon House. Those are all available if you go over to the phenomenamagazine.co.uk and just click on what Steve's books are, and show you a little bit of a link, an email address, and send it to him, and see what books he has available, and he can mail them out to you. And remember, he's mailing them from the other side of the planet without a gravitational anomaly to send it through. So pay attention to that kind of thing. And you're coming, and you are going to be in Los Angeles next weekend. That is the weekend of February. Which one?
This is this weekend coming up. That will be from the I believe they start the Conscious Life Expo on the Friday, so we're talking the 7th, 8th, and 9th. 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. I think it goes for.
Yeah, I've a friend of mine is also going to be there. She sells woo-woo stuff. No, she's I'm talking to her next week too about it. It's Apolia. It's a name I can't pronounce, but she is. I see her at a lot of the metaphysical conferences, and this is her conference basically. That this is one of the ones that she puts on. So she's
Yeah, well, there are lots. I've seen it. I go to these. I'll always look through the stalls. I find it fascinating because there's all these wonderful little things, and there's a lot of the connections now. People are making the connections. Putting the dots together slowly to realize that there is a conscious connection with the phenomena. But the problem is that we're battling society. What people don't realize when they go out on investigations is that what they do is mostly take sweet things with them. Chocolate, and take some munchies and things. It's going to be cold tonight. I'm taking a bar of chocolate or whatever. It's the worst things to have, because the amount of refined sugar, it nullifies the fight or flight system. It just completely ruins it. You're not even going to work. It's not going to trigger properly. And I've always said, if you do have an experience, listen to your body, because the skin of your body is the biggest organism that we have, and it talks to us. It tells us when we have those experiences, when the hairs go up on the back of our neck, it means that it's experiencing something in that environment that you might not be able to see or hear, but it's there. Experiencing those things is that survival sense. Making sure it works properly is basically stopping yourself from having refined sugar for 72 hours prior to investigation. That's what we do, because we have to rely on it. Because sometimes when we're out in that field, we know that we have to go. The time is now to leave. We don't overstay our welcome, and sometimes when we're witnessing phenomena. And don't get me wrong, the phenomena can put on a lovely light display sometimes. It can literally glamour you, in the sense of speaking, when sometimes we should maybe take a step back. So it's always good for everybody to understand it's about this conscious connection and listening to your own body as well. So we do kind of get into that side as well. So Conscious Life Expo covers all those sort of things as well, about the consciousness and about your body and listening to it, because there's a lot around us. Just because we don't see and feel it and hear it, it's there, and it's tuning ourselves to it sometimes.
Yeah, evolution, or whatever you want to believe, has made our body into its own little group of antennae, and it's for our own survival. So pay attention to that. And anytime you're out doing an investigation, pay attention to that and make good notes. So take a notepad and pay attention, and write this stuff down if your hair's tingling at a certain point. And I find I don't want to talk to the other people about stuff when I hear something or I see something or I feel something. I'll just write it down and then I'll bring it up later.
Yeah, that's always
this point, because usually when I hate to say something out loud over top of ghost, haunted locations.
Well, that's
somebody will say, "Oh, did you hear that? I just heard a voice from down the hall." Meanwhile, underneath what they're saying is a little kid going, "Hi, I'm a ghost. Can you help me?"
Exactly.
But you've covered it all up because you've been chatting about the bang.
It does travel like that. It does work like that. We've done experiments and took 21 people into a house which wasn't haunted, and we fed them with prior knowledge and expectation, and we sat back for 4 hours and let the flood of reports come in, and boy did they come in. And it just goes to show that the power of belief and prior knowledge or expectation of phenomena will create it for them. And people will report all sorts of strange things, and we tell them afterwards we're not even in a haunted environment. So it goes to show that the psychology of the human mind and how it works. But we also know that true phenomena can actually pick out an individual. It's a new phenomena which was referenced as communication, a form of communications, which actually targets an individual, like it targets a tape recorder and not the other two tape recorders running next to it.
Yes.
Amazing,
that drives me crazy.
It's known as transplacement, James. And this new area referred to transplacement means that they can use us like pieces of equipment. It's just like those guys that were born with hearing impediments and use those cochlear ear devices, which generate frequency of vibrations across the ear canal and hairs to help them hear. It's exactly the same process. So when somebody turns around and said, "I've just heard this," and nobody else has, it doesn't mean he didn't, because sometimes now there could be that the phenomenon is directly associated to them. In other words, it's communicating with them and using us as a piece of equipment, just as they have with tape recorders. And you set 3 identical tape recorders up and run them, and you've got a female voice on one and a male on one and nothing on the other. And you think to yourself, they're supposed to record in the harmonic range, and we're not hearing it. Then you have to question what physics is being used. And of course, I'll have to go through all that on another.
So we'll get off to
another
thing. Steve, I want to thank you for dropping by to this side of the planet, from your side of the planet. And we're going to set up a time maybe when you get back from Los Angeles, and we'll have you back on talking about one of your other experiences. And I'd like to get a little bit more about the courses you've put together.
Well, they're available. I mean, we've got details up on the Phenomenon Magazine website, phenomenonmagazine.co.uk, and it's listed under the page heading Stellar Courses. It tells you everybody about the course there, but it will be for sale in the US under MUFON. They're putting it up on their store, I believe, next month, and it's due to launch, I believe, next week, actually, at Conscious Life Expo. So it will be available. But like I say, anybody who does those courses gets those free updates all the time, because, like I said, you do need those free updates.
We certainly do. And that's how this line of investigation, this thing that we're involved in, this pseudoscience, is fluid. And we have to keep it fluid, and we have to come in with our minds opened. And you certainly do that. So I really appreciate your take on these investigations and the phenomena itself. Steve Mera, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. It's an absolute pleasure. I look forward to returning.
I'm condemned to the long, endless night, and I live in the absence of light, and my shadow has life of its own, watching you while you sleep all alone.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. And hey! Let's be careful out there.
Far over the snow, what are those voices? They sing as they go, what are those voices? Look up for the mountain. Somebody hide, somebody better hide. Through the hail, like a pack of angry wolves. ahead like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. Dead or alive, we're out to get you, dead or alive. If you're the one, better run away, son, you are done, throw your